So we are here at the National Landing Experience Center, just outside of the DC Startup and Tech Week, where our opening speaker is here with me today, Evan Regan Levine. Is Regan or Regan?
Regan.
Evan Regan Levine. I caught myself there. From JBG Smith, who is completely transforming the area here around Crystal City. So let's talk about some of the things that you brought up today. So one is your role in helping to bring the second headquarters for Amazon to this area. Now, a lot of the tech firms started out in the arid West and are now moving here to the mid-Atlantic. And of course, we're right here on the Potomac River. How important is it for these West Coast arid region tech firms to have access to a more water-rich area when they make their decisions about where to?
Yeah, that's one part. I'm not massively connected to the sort of water utilization component of it. You know, a big part of our role was really talking about workforce, and
yes,
that they were really focused on workforce as a resource and where they could access the talent they needed to grow. I think for them, in our conversation, or at least my part of the conversation, we didn't talk as much about direct access to any kind of water resource or something like that, although I know it's got to be really important as they think about their data center growth and aspects of their company like that, just as a corporate headquarters. So for them, it was understanding, could we build a corporate headquarters, a second headquarters, have access to the talent that we really wanted. That was things that were important to them. Where Virginia Tech's Innovation Campus was a huge piece of it. It was the existing depth of extraordinary engineering and technical talent in the DC metro region. It was having a place that they had the right infrastructure, both digital and physical, in terms of trains, access to fiber access, wireless access, all the things that they would need in order to make their business really work and how they could make their business truly global. And so for them, this area offered all of those different components really well. So at least from what I was familiar with, there was less conversation about the water piece of this.
Right, yeah, and absolutely, this is an incredible region for workforce. You also talked about capitalizing on the fact that we have the Pentagon here, we have major national security here, and at Water Citizen, we were a big part of working on getting the Department of Energy to recognize the water energy nexus, as well as working with the folks at DoD on the water security, the Army water blueprint, and how integral water is into all that. So tell us a little bit more about this whole energy security, and we'll add the water part later.
No, it's true. I think it's really interesting, and I'm really eager to hear what you guys are working on that front. But I think that what we realized is that a lot of our customers are really at the intersection of defense and technology. So as those companies look for a place to be, they want to be in a place where they can talk to companies like Amazon on the tech side. They can recruit from schools like Virginia Tech, but they also have access to the Department of Energy, like you noted, Department of Defense. And so many technologies that we're seeing are in fact dual-use technologies that are invested in or are important to the Department of Energy and for energy security, as well as the Department of Defense. And so a great example, we've been partnering with a venture capital fund manager called Energy Innovation Capital. Energy Innovation Capital is incredibly exciting, investing in a lot of really cutting-edge energy technologies, even water technologies. And some of the things that they've done have a really applicable dual use. There's a company that they invested in that's very focused on using mining tailings to refine rare earth metals. So it's really exciting and important. They also have a company called Ocean Arrow that has unbelievable autonomous underwater vehicles that are important to survey offshore energy production, but also could have an important defense application. So as we've seen more companies at that nexus and more people investing there, and the priority overlap between DOE and DoD, we're really trying to do everything we can as real estate investors and owners of this neighborhood to bring together the capital, the incubator, the accelerator programs in those areas that can help drive startup creation around those really critical use technologies.
Yeah, and it's so important because, of course, Department of Energy, a lot of people don't know, was started as a security agency around the nuclear bombs and the nuclear energy, and how do we control all the nuclear materials and everything. And of course, one of our Water Pitch alumni from the Water Startup Batching Extravaganza, Patrick Ho, is going to be speaking this afternoon about his federal grant related to lithium extraction that then becomes a product for people who need lithium because it's in short supply, right?
Totally, and I think that, when you talk about companies like that, that's absolutely such a focus. And people, you're right, don't recognize the amount of innovation that comes out of the Department of Energy. Just think about everything that happens through ARPA-E. People are familiar with DARPA and inventing the internet, but thinking about what ARPA is doing on the energy side is also really exciting because there are so many cutting-edge energy technologies. I think about the Special Competitive Studies Project, an unbelievable AI think tank. It's actually based here in the neighborhood. One of the things that they're advocating for and that I've heard from them is just the focus on how do we get the energy production needs necessary to maintain the U.S. lead in terms of data centers, AI compute. All of those things involve massive energy discussions and uses, and also a lot of discussions around water for cooling. So there's such a big part of that we're seeing people come together here where you need the technical know-how, you need the regulatory know-how, you need the smartest professors from the best universities doing technology transfer, and you need capital to turn those tech transfer ideas into actual companies that can serve those public and private customers, and that's what we're trying to build here.
Wow, that was great. I should just can that and put you in our introduction because I'm like trying to get people to think about water as more than just humanitarian. Let's go save people in foreign countries that don't have water kind of stuff.
We've got to cool all this compute if we're going to win the data war.
Absolutely. Now, of course, JPG itself, JPG Smith, and of course I remember the days of the Charles E. Smith, and part of that is a regional powerhouse in construction in any kind, in buildings and everything, any kind of building. Just an integral part of it is where the water is going to go and where the water isn't going to go. Are you going to have the controls so the wall doesn't fall down because the water table gets too high, or are you going to have stormwater and constraints? How has that really impacted this tremendous development that you've done here at Crystal City Metro, and how important is that?
Such a consideration. A big part of National Landing's appeal is just given that it's right against the Potomac, and we have incredible access to DC, to other parts of Northern Virginia, but a big part of building in an area like this is understanding how we build in relation to the water table. And so it's very important to make sure that when you're creating these bathtubs for new development, you're able to pump water out that it's clean and managed properly. That's a huge component that goes into all of the discussions of everything we're building from an engineering perspective, as well as our sustainability team being focused on the other side of how water is actually used through the buildings. But I think for us, it's never far from sort of top of mind as we think about the constructability of projects like this. And we do have the advantage here, though, a lot of our project is a reuse and reimagining of the existing 1960s, 1970s, 1980s vintage office market into a modern mixed-use community. And that's a big part of what we're trying to deliver.
Awesome. And I hope you can just meet one of our speakers, Sue Springsteen from H2O Connected, who does a lot with like leak detection in toilets in big buildings, which that really adds up. And you guys are doing making LEED certified, doing things to
I'm probably
within
the wrong
building.
person to answer that, but I can actually find out from our operations team. But I know they're very focused on that because we've been impacted in that way before by leaks, and making sure that we're tracking it, we're on top of it is a huge part of making sure our business runs smoothly. I mean, I think about even my own, one of the first things that I did when I bought my new house was add that kind of technology and actually be able to have, a consumer mow and flow that I have in my house is put my peace of mind at ease, and I have water sensors throughout the house. I think that's such an important direction because for consumers as well as sort of producers of housing and managers of housing on the apartment side, it's how do we link together some of these new smart technologies to sort of reduce the risk of loss, to manage efficiency, but also just make sure that when you go away for the weekend, you're not worried that your house is going to be flooded when you get home. So I think there's all these applications that at the end of the day, our business is a consumer business in so many ways where we provide housing. We want to make sure that people are really comfortable that their house is secure and that it's well served, and there are a lot of different ways we're trying to incorporate more smart technology to do that.
Beautiful. A lot of people just think climate is just about energy, it's about carbon footprint, but so much, especially when you're dealing with buildings, is so much of the energy consumption is, cooling water, heating water, moving the water up and down the stairs, So that's great. Now, one of the things that we try to do at Water Pitch, the Water Startup Matching Extravaganza, is make sure that we are providing opportunities to up to 60 water startups and up to 50 reverse pitches, and hopefully you guys will be one of them from clients, from investors, from federal funding, from accelerators, and including a lot of diverse founders and funders, right? How do we incorporate women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses? And you mentioned during your opening session today about what you have at the water park with supporting women, minority-owned businesses. And of course, we are always looking for innovative ways to showcase that during the breaks at our event. tell us about what you're doing at the water park.
Sure thing. So one of the hardest things for a lot of small businesses to do is get access to capital, particularly small women or minority-owned businesses. And one of the areas that we really had a need for was when we transformed this 1980s office park into something more modern. We were really focused on how do we bring together the right kind of retail environment, the right places to go to eat is a big part of that. And so we started small with an idea of how do we provide better access to effectively an incubator program from small, local, women, minority-owned businesses to get access to sort of try out being a restaurateur. And that's for people sometimes graduating from the food truck or sometimes people starting even before the food truck. But if they make great food, they shouldn't have to worry about access to capital to be able to try out running a business around that food. And so we have a vetting process and we have a leasing process, but we built out effectively 9 retail kiosks that have 2 restaurants that are anchor restaurants in the park that are run by a different operator who serves as a mentor and an operator for the overall park. And then we found these really interesting, creative, smaller businesses, put them into one of these kiosks that comes ready-made. You show up, it has the hood, it has the range, it's got everything you need to cook and operate. You have point of sale set up, and all we do, we don't charge them rent, we charge them a percentage rent. So a percentage of their sales goes back to us to cover costs, so they have an access, so they don't have to shell out for building out a restaurant, doing everything. We help them get to that point, and then they pay us back via percentage rent, which is manageable for their businesses. And some of these businesses have done extraordinarily well, and they provide a really valuable amenity to us, and it's a way for us to identify promising culinary talent that we can then hopefully grow into more stores.
Oh, that is absolutely fantastic. You know, there are so many studies. It's so hard for women, minority-owned businesses to be seen as credible, to be by the people who are giving out the money, who they're not getting the financing, and to have that opportunity. And of course, this area, it used to be not such a great place to come and try to find it. I did a training program once a month, every weekend, coming in, 1 weekend a month, coming down here, and they'd send us out to go get our lunches. It's like, okay, where's the subway in the corner and the office park or something?
I want to change that.
And so, it sounds like you guys are doing a tremendous job of really creating a living space. And actually, that reminds me, one of the points you made was about just this whole post-COVID shift of what is the role of the office and how do we rethink, what did you call them, warehouses?
Warehouses for people. And I didn't come up with that. It was something I heard from someone I was having a great conversation with, and they said we don't build warehouses for people anymore.
Yeah.
And I think the post-COVID office environment is different. And, people are coming back to work more, but they're coming back to work to collaborate. It's about people talking to other people, and it's driving creative interactions there. And so we need to reshape our stock to match up with the new reality of how people work, and that work may be more flexible, and it may involve a component of work being done in the office every single day, but that work might not just be sitting at a desk working by yourself with your headphones on. It's really about how do you come together to collaborate with team members, even if those teams are really large, to come up with creative solutions. So our office stock has to adapt to do that, and it's also because we're not just building warehouses for people, there's probably too much office. We need to shrink that pool, come up with creative other uses for some of the office buildings, acknowledging it won't be all of them, and we're probably never going to be in a position where we're 100% hybrid or 100% remote, but that the office world needs to adapt itself, and that's something that our industry has been slow to adopt.
Yeah. I mean, that's just, especially coming out of an engineering background, so often, people come into the engineering fields wanting to do something impactful, wanting to save the world, and then we end up in these, engineering firms where, it's like, oh, well, this will save space if we put you all in cubicles instead of your own offices, so you can't even hear yourself think. And then, you want to be able to work by yourself, but you also want to be able to have those meetings where you all get together and say, oh, I'll work on this part, I'll work on this part, and then everyone goes back to their offices, or they go out in the field, and then they come back to the office. So, you're right, you said something about, even before COVID, we weren't in the offices 100% of the time, especially with something like water.
100% of the space, 100% of the time. And that's, I would say no one. Most people, most companies weren't. And so it's a realization that as we've started to track data more about the workplace, you have more insight to help you identify the opportunity to change the configuration of that space and make that space more adaptable to the way people are actually working. And that can be different firm to firm. And you said engineers is a great example.
Yeah.
How do you create the focus areas? How do you create the collaboration spaces? But that probably in many cases results in actually taking less office space because you just don't need as much because you're not assigning necessarily a desk for every head for every person. Now, lots of companies are different on that front, but I think you're seeing more focus on workplace post-COVID, and that workplace strategy is now dictating some of how people attack their real estate portfolios and what kind of environments they want to be in.
And so we see a lot of people getting into entrepreneurship later in their careers, partly because of all the takeovers and buy-ups of different engineering firms and places that just treat us like, go crunch the numbers and we'll make all the decisions, because now it's being run by MBAs instead of engineers. And so, it's how do we create simulating office spaces that are going to make people want to stay in water engineering, in water science, in all these different areas?
I think it's such an important part about, like you said before, where you go for the training. Well, you're there for a collaborative purpose. You have space for collaboration. The space around it, the shoulder spaces, as you kind of call them, have to be just as important, because those really strong connections, if you think about your personal life or your work life, they're not made sitting at the desk. They're made after work, saying, hey, we just finished this really exciting project. I'm going to go, why don't we go have a beer? Why don't we go sit outside? Or why don't we grab lunch together and talk through a problem? That's how you build a lot of those human connections. So the places where that happens need those sorts of restaurants, gathering places, third places that you don't have. It's not just home and work, it's that third place too. Where do you actually develop those and have a neighborhood where if your office is there, it's easy to get to, you can access it via public transit, via airports, like we're building our bridge to the airport here, but then the space around it has to be amenitized in the right way so that it can actually have those places to go form those meaningful human connections, or you're going to have the reaction you just did. I don't want to come here because I went to my training and I couldn't find the weird subway and have lunch there. That shouldn't be the best offering, and that's not the best we can do.
Yeah. And of course, the connectivity between here and DC, we're going to have our event, Water Pitch, at DC Water, which has this gorgeous HQO event space. And they completely transformed that area around the baseball stadium. So now there are, kind of similar to what you're doing here.
We're big investors down there. We own almost everything outside of Center Field Gate. We
oh
built
my
the
God.
Transportation headquarters down there. We've been heavily involved in that neighborhood. I totally love it. It's a great example of what can happen when you have really thoughtful, concerted effort to make a place a lot better than a bunch of abandoned industrial buildings and make it feel, but it takes a lot of community commitment, and it's a realization from groups like yours that as we build these new projects and they have these things that adapt to the need, we have to actually go there, use them, support them, be part of that neighborhood experience, because I think you guys will have a great time down there. It's a really exciting place to spend time, but someone had to make those commitments years ago to say, we're going to put a stake in the ground and build this event space. We're going to do it in this neighborhood that has all the right amenities. They're not just out somewhere in a nondescript, boring office park where the best thing you can do is go down to the building and tell me.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for the space for DC Startup and Tech Week. And we're excited to see this new convention center. What is it that you're going to be doing?
2026. A new, bigger version of this and more event space and collaboration space. It's under construction. We're incredibly excited.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, and hopefully we'll see you at waterpitch.org at the Water Match Extravaganza. And for everyone watching, come join us there. Thank you.
Thanks so much.